Do you know how hard Russian hackers are trying to get your info? And a good MFA system is often all that stands in their way. Today, Persona, Dr. Mike Saylor and I dig into multi-factor authentication and why old school MFA really isn't enough anymore. We talk about how bad guys steal your session tokens and wear you down with fake MFA requests, and why even better than MFA is FIDO2 and Passkeys. We cover a Google Workspace attack that ran undetected for over a year and hand you some simple steps that you can be doing right now. If you're still letting important accounts sit there with no MFA, I got a name for that, and it's not a nice one. If this is your first time watching or listening to me, I'm W. Curtis Preston, aka Mr. Backup, and I've been obsessing over backup, recovery, and now cyber recovery for over 30 years. If that's your bag, then I'm your guy. You're not going to find anyone that cares about this topic more than me. Ever since 1993, when a database died and I didn't have any backups. That was not a good day. Now I've written 5 O'Reilly books, a blog, and a podcast. Here we turn unappreciated admins into cyber recovery heroes. This is the Backup Wrap-Up. Hi, folks. Dr. Mike Saylor and I have just published our new book, Learning Ransomware Response and Recovery. Most books on this subject tell you how not to get ransomware. We actually took a different approach. We start by acknowledging the odds of your organization getting hit by some kind of ransomware are virtually 100%. So instead of pretending that we can prevent all of it, we teach you how to prepare for it, respond, and recover. Ransomware is inevitable. Recovery is a choice. Check it out at stopransomware.com. Hi, and welcome to the Backup Wrap-Up. I'm your host, W. Curtis Preston, and today I have with me my 2 best friends. First off, let me just talk about the guy that's currently cooking in his seat, Dr. Mike Saylor. What's the temperature over there today, Mike?
Today, I think it's close to just over 100. We're just getting ready and excited for tomorrow's 106.
Ouch. That's just, and I shared with you before the call, it's also really hot here in Oceanside. It's 85, which is for us is just really high.
I've never tried to cook an egg on my head, but tomorrow I might.
And speaking of super hot, how's it going, Prasanna?
I'm good, Curtis. Nice to see you again, Mike. And I hope you are not planning to go anywhere outside tomorrow, just like stay indoors all day long.
I've got to drive to Houston. I'll be on the road all day.
At least air conditioning.
Yes, air-conditioned road travel.
You know, quick, completely unrelated story of driving to Houston. I once had a situation where I was flying American Airlines and I was flying in and out of Houston, but via DFW, of course, because that was American Airlines, right? And I found myself in Dallas and I tried to get American to say, hey, how about I just hop on the second leg instead of driving all the way to Houston just to get on a plane, just to come right back where I am at. And they go, no, you got to do it. You got to do it. Or otherwise you're going to pay $755 or whatever. So I drove to Houston, and 1 mile south or 1 mile shy of the Houston airport, I got a speeding ticket.
Oh.
And at the time,
I really thought where this was going to go is that you got off the plane in Dallas and went, wow, this weather sucks. And then you got to Houston and you went, oh, well, maybe Dallas wasn't so bad.
Yeah, what I remember at the time was the trooper, I don't know, the cop told me that at the time, Texas and California didn't share computers or whatever. And so he said, you need to surrender your driver's license. And I was like, I'm going to the plane. I really don't remember the end of that story, but I remember the cop took my license. And somehow I got home. Anyway, so gotta love Texas. Anyway, and American Airlines for putting me in that position. And me for speeding, but whatever. It's not my fault. Of course not. Because why take any sort of responsibility? Speaking of not my fault, we're going to talk about an MFA, multi-factor authentication. And I thought you'd start, Persona, with a story that we covered not that long ago. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So this was I want to say it was probably a month ago, maybe
Yeah.
2 months ago, where a bad actor was detected and shut down. But what ended up happening is there was a software package that was used mainly, I think, in medical and some of like the academics instances called REDCap.
Yeah.
And it basically is a database that allows you to do things. Anyway, what ended up happening is there were vulnerable versions of that database out there running, and bad actors were able to exploit it and attack the older REDCap instances. And then what they did is they just kind of waited around and saw people logging in, and they somehow got credentials for the Google Workspace admin and kind of then used that to log into Google Workspace as the admin and then set up forwarding rules to forward pretty much all emails in the company or in the institution to a random email address, and it was unmonitored. And I think it was running for quite a while before they
It was.
realized
Yeah.
that it
I
was,
think it was like over a year.
yeah,
Yeah. So this was a multi-stage, it's a three-stage
yeah,
attack, right? So the initial identification of the vulnerable versions, which were running in parallel with the newer versions, which is just
yep.
bad, right? And then harvesting the credentials and then using those credentials to log into Gmail and then using that to then do something else, which was essentially exfiltration, right?
Yeah.
So does that make it a four-stage? I think that makes it a four-stage attack. That is very studious. I mean,
Yeah. Could we also talk about the fact that they also made it such that if someone tried to upgrade the REDCap instances, it would just redeploy the malware again and just keep
yeah,
running over and over. And so you could never really fix it.
good times. Are you impressed, Mike, with that attack?
No, it's common progression of an attack and common creativity. Yeah, they were lucky because they found these vulnerable systems that were out there, and they were out there intentionally. They wanted these older systems out there to ensure usability and accessibility
Right,
from the lowest common denominator.
right.
So yeah, I'm not so impressed. They same playbook that most bad guys are gonna follow the attack methodology. It just they found a vulnerable system and they took advantage of it.
It's like
Yeah,
going and finding Windows XP systems out there. Come on, if you're running Windows XP at this date, right?
Yep. Yeah. Some of the server versions, yeah.
yeah. Could be, what was it? Yeah, Windows XP. But that's really old, Windows XP. I
Mean time to
remember,
compromise is less than 10 minutes if you plug it into the internet.
yeah, I remember when one of the most commonly exploited versions of Windows Server was Windows Server 2000. And I remember that we discovered this in 2013, and I remember saying that it's a teenager at this point. It's time for it to move out. Um, but all right, so old version's bad. But so let's talk about Mike.
What does this have to do with MFA?
We're getting to the MFA. So Mike, let's talk about first why MFA is so important, right? Because this is another story. That story is if they simply had implemented MFA for their Gmail instance, which, by the way, I believe Gmail now requires.
Google
I'm pretty
Workspace?
sure Google Workspace requires MFA now, right? Every time I've set up, even if you don't do like the full MFA, it's going to require you to verify who you are all over the place. But Mike, I'd like to talk about the concept of social engineering, which is a very common way that the bad guys are using phishing to get credentials. So you want to talk about that? What do we talk about that?
There's a lot of different ways. So it's understanding your victim. So doing your homework. So if you're going to attack a particular organization or group or system or person, you're going to go research them. What are their hobbies? What does their social media footprint look like? What does their credit look like? What kind of car do they drive? Where do their kids go to school? And you're going to find something out of all your research that is common human interaction. Like, hey, my kid goes to school with your kid and they gave me your email to see if they could have a play date, or Timmy left his lunchbox or something. Yeah, that's
Right.
kind of no pun intended, but elementary, but that's That's how you get people's first response. And that's really what you're looking for, is that first response. And in some cases, your social engineering attack, you only get one response. So sometimes you got to be pretty good. But at the same time, statistically speaking, if your target audience is large enough, statistically, you've got about a 20% or better success rate. So if I send out 1 million if I send out 10,000 emails, 20% of 10,000 is still a good number. I just need one, right? In an organization, I just need one person to click on something that's going to either harvest their credentials, or they are going to willingly give it to me. Like, Curtis, this is Mike from the IT department. We have a new help desk interface. Below is the link to automatically submit tickets or check on the status of a help call. Here's our new 800 number. It's going to be great. We're looking forward to improving service and solving your problems faster.
Mike, don't give people ideas, Mike.
This is one of the oldest ones, the help desk.
Yeah.
But, click here or open this attachment for your chance at winning one of 20 Starbucks gift cards for being the first one to write a review on the IT department's service, level of service. And you do. And so, maybe I've got next thing that happens is I've got to enter my email address and log into the network. Like, please verify your credentials so we know it's you and not your kids or your neighbor. So it's, email phishing is getting a user to interact with the email in order to either automatically harvest or prompt them to provide credentials because it looks legitimate or it appeals to their humanity or, I want my kid's lunchbox back or whatever it is.
I remember one time, and to this day, I don't know if this was a successful phishing attack or if this was a successful test of my ability to or inability to recognize a phishing attack. When I worked at a former employer, they had some sort of incident where we were going to get free credit monitoring for a while. And right at that moment is when I got a contact from, hey, we're going to sign up for your free credit monitoring. All we need is what? Your name, your birthday, your social security number. And I found out that it was not the company Indeed that was contacting me, but it was so expertly timed that I fell for it. And to this day, I don't know if I gave the 3 pieces of information that they want all in one go, or if it was just them testing the.
But here's a question for you, Curtis, and also Mike. At this point, don't you just assume everyone has it out there? Like, that information's just out there anyway?
Yeah, I kind of joke that I protect myself from identity theft by maintaining bad credit. I mean, you've got access to my stuff. You just don't want to use it.
I like that. And by the way, it's technically not on topic, but I have all my credit reports locked, right? And I think that's a life thing that everybody else should have, is that in the rare instances where you're actually opening new credit, you can unlock it for 24 hours, do the thing. And in fact, most of them allow you one of the choices is unlock for 24 hours just for that situation. And that would at least stop those people if they get access to that. Just a note to my U.S. listeners, all 3 credit reporting agencies are required by law to allow you to freeze your credit report for free. So I can't recommend this strongly enough. It's not technically related to this situation, but it's just something that a lot of people don't realize is there. You log into Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion.com. Get a login if you don't already have one. Log in and then look for freeze. You may have to look around for it. Honestly, some of them really hide it, but it is there. It's required by law, and then freeze it. It does mean that when you apply for credit, you will get initially told, hey, you need to go unfreeze your report. It's a minor inconvenience for the hopefully infrequent action of you actually applying for new credit. And this is a big identity theft thing that you can do. I'd love to hear, for those of you that are from other countries, I'd love to hear in the YouTube comments what you do in your country. But so you just freeze it and it stays frozen. And then some of them, and I prefer these, actually allow you to do a temporary unfreeze or thaw, if you will. I actually use the word lock my credit. They actually have a credit lock, and they will charge you for it. It does exactly the same thing as a freeze. And by the way, when you're logging into these pages, they all want you to pay for a membership, but they just immediately throw that in your face. Just close that out. These companies are already making enough off of you. You don't need to sign up for a membership. Signing up for a credit monitoring service, that's an entirely different thing. But anyway, so freeze your credit reports unless you are applying for credit. And again, I'd love to hear comments from other listeners from other countries. And yeah, I agree, Persona, you just assume that all that stuff's out there. But for the record, I do still have my Facebook birthday and my real birthday. I don't want to make it easy for them. So, all right. So basically social engineering is just a variety of tactics, as you said, to get people to either directly give you the information you're looking for, or to basically just open the door in some way, to develop a relationship in some way so that you can then at some point eventually get the thing that you're looking for. I can think of a story that I saw Kevin Mitnick telling once, where he talked about they had a way where they would find a person of note in an environment, and they would invite them to speak at a conference, a non-existent conference. And then they would say, we just need to do a quick Zoom interview with you prior to the thing to talk about whatever. And they give them a Zoom link, and it's a bad Zoom link. And that link downloaded the dropper to do the bad thing, and then took them to Zoom. So the person had no idea that anything had just happened. And at that point, they were completely controlling their computer. So yeah, social engineering. Yeah. What's that?
Spoof in the middle.
Yeah.
Bank account logins are the same way. The most recent one that I've seen that's pretty clever is, when you get a phishing email and you want to report it as phishing, there's the button at the top that says report as phishing.
Yeah.
Well, bad guys are sending phishing emails with the report phishing button in the email. So it's bad. It looks bad. I'm going to click the button to report it as bad, but clicking that button is the trigger for the malware in the email.
Oh man.
Tell you what, man, that's just not good. Hang on, let me pull up all right. Let's talk about FIDO2, right? Do you want to talk about what FIDO is? Fast Identity Online.
Well, there you go. It's kind of like the one-time password stuff, but it's a little more permanent. So strong, a good FIDO profile. And I think there's different versions of FIDO out now too. In fact, I think it's called FIDO2. The idea though is something more than, just your username and password, but also something outside of just an email or a text message you would get.
Could you give examples, Mike? Like, based on what you just said, like what would that potentially encompass?
Well, so traditional MFAs, an SMS message or a one-time password or an email. FIDO is like true encrypted token. You can install it on your laptop or your phone, but it has to be paired. So it's public and private keys. So it's got your public keys out there. So if I wanted to have a communication with Persona, in order to encrypt that, you would get my public key, I would get your public key, and then our private keys would match those up. And those private keys are on our device. So it's kind of an old school asymmetric encryption approach that they've just kind of put a new name on it and attached it to a new way of talking and encrypting our stuff. But it's really it's designed to be transactional instead of like normal email communication. It's assigned to a authentication or a purchase, or it's more transactional.
When we get to the actual action points when we get to the actual action items, it's going to be really simple. So we just need to drive home the point here of why this is such a big deal. And I think the ArcGIS story is another scary one, where there was an entire year that went by where they had control of something. And that all started with what, Mike?
Well, the Flax Typhoon, and I think that's the case we're talking about here, is actually the name of an APT group, but the initial identification of this particular attack was because of their botnet. And so looking for vulnerable systems, looking for a way in, Flax Typhoon is primarily an espionage campaign. So it's not so much access as it is true information and more specifically government level information. So pretty confident that Flax Typhoon is run by the Chinese government. Targets were primarily government organizations, Taiwan, Asia, America, Canada. The initial compromise was VPNs and firewalls, vulnerabilities, web servers. And then from there, that compromise allowed them to expand based on tools and software available to them. So living off the land type of attack. So PowerShell, Python, sysinternals, RDP from one machine to the next. One of the things that makes me smile about this particular campaign is all of the fun cyber threat acronyms and code words like juicy potato. So
Potato.
So many of the tools and techniques in Flax Typhoon were pretty kind of, I don't know who came up with the words or the code names. Mimikatz has been around for a while. That's a good credential harvesting. Anybody that hears Mimikatz knows it's associated with malware and cyber attacks. But the privilege escalation tool that they used was called Juicy Potato. And some of the web shells, like one of the web shells was called China Chopper. Just some fun acronyms and terminology, but it was actually a pretty big problem.
At some point, didn't they get access to an administrator like login again that again didn't seem to have any MFA on it?
They did. And some of those systems were like IoT devices, like cameras. So if you remember back in the day, I'm talking, man, it had to have been almost 10 years ago or more, the Mirai botnet.
Botnet. Yep.
And so in Flax Typhoon, their botnet was called Raptor Train. And so the Raptor Train, using the Mirai type virus, compromised hundreds of thousands of IoT devices in this campaign. And so that was cameras, routers, switches, network storage devices. So that Mirai, if you remember back in that case, the Mirai botnet was successful because some of the credentials for those devices were hard coded on the chips. And the manufacturer of those chips didn't care. They're like, I just produce chips. It goes in something. I have no control over that. So very similarly, this attack group and their botnet were able to leverage hard-coded credentials to get access to the device. And in some cases, it was root-level device access. And in other cases, it got them on the device where they were then able to deploy Mimikatz or use some of these other available tools to harvest credentials.
The way I would put all of that together is that the bad actors have a seemingly infinite number of ways that they can harvest credentials. We talked about phishing. We talked about using old versions of software that have vulnerabilities. And we talked about just botnets. They just have a seemingly, I think we probably just scratched the surface, Mike, of a seemingly infinite.
Well, it is seemingly infinite because we don't think like they do. And they do this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We only do it 8 to 5 Monday through Friday as a normal user, right? And probably not the full 8 hours. We're doing other stuff. We're just not focused. But yes, it is seemingly unending and ever evolving ways of harvesting our credentials.
But Curtis, I have a question for you now.
Sure.
So we've talked about all these scary ways that they're always going to be ahead of us, that we're never going to be able to catch up because we don't have the time or effort or expertise to be focused on securing things all the time. So, like, do we just sort of call it quits, unplug ourselves from the internet and just go back to sticks and fire?
Well, that's a great question, Razan, but that is the only way to have a truly secure system, right? I think my point, and Mike, feel free to enhance this point, but my point is you have to assume that the bad guys are going to get someone's credentials in your environment. And so the idea, this is the whole point of MFA, right? The whole idea of MFA is that there is a seemingly limitless number of ways, that the bad guys can get. The other is the purchasing of the dumps, the credential dumps that are available online, right? There's so many ways for them to get access to credentials that you are committing, I'll say this again, you are committing professional malfeasance if you are allowing access to important accounts without MFA turned on, right? You're noticing this, and we're going to go a little bit, we're going to talk about phishing resistant MFA, but you've noticed this happen in your personal life. Prasanna, can you think of what's happened to you over the last, I'm going to say 10 years with things like your bank, with things like Gmail, with
Oh
things
yeah,
like,
everything's
yeah,
going multi-factor authentication, right? It's you log in, it sends something because now you also have phones, right? And
right.
so everything gets sent to your phone where it's like, hey, did you try to log in on this laptop? Accept or deny from your phone or some other device, right? And so you see this happening because it's becoming easier, I guess. Do you think it's becoming easier to enforce MFA versus before? Like, I remember when I was working and you'd sort of walk around with a little key fob, right,
Yeah.
with the rotating code, and that you always had to have it in order to be able to log in, and if for some reason it wasn't there or the battery died, you're screwed. I think
Like,
MFA has made it a little easier, and so kind of over the last 10 years, like you're saying, yeah, I think back then there was nothing, and now it's sort of become commonplace.
now I think the difference between back then and now is that we always have this other thing on us now, right? We always have we should always have our smartphone with us. And we can
Where's your
assume
phone,
that
Curtis?
my phone is right here, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And by the way, my life is, I can't go anywhere without my phone. My car runs from my phone. So as soon as I step, and which is perfect for me because I got serious. By the way, I've officially been diagnosed with ADHD now because I had to wait 60 years to find out, yeah, Curtis, you got ADHD. So the fact that I can't leave the house without a phone, I get in my car, that means I always have my phone with me, right? Because otherwise I definitely would be the guy that's 40 miles away and going, oh crap, I left my phone back in my house, right? But yeah, we have that device with us. And now we have a number of pieces of software, either commercial ones like the Semantic VIP tool. I know that a couple of my different vendors require that, or free versions from Google or Authy or Mike, you mentioned you use another tool that you mentioned that I think on, I don't know, a few recordings ago, you use a completely different tool. I don't remember what it was. It doesn't matter. But yeah, there are a number of tools. And yes, there are also the truly secure ones are those things that, like the YubiKey, right? That is a truly secure one-time password thing that isn't, the only downside to the phone is potentially somebody could hack your phone, right? So if you're seeing this happen in your personal life and you're in your professional life and you're in IT, and you care at all about cybersecurity, if you've got important accounts that are just sitting there waiting for you to just log in with no other authentication, then again, professional malfeasance. I don't want to call you nasty names, but I don't know what else, I don't know what else to say at that point. Mike, let's talk a little bit about, I know this is something you've talked about before multiple times. We talk about this idea of killing the trust button, right? This is something you talk a lot about. You want to talk about that?
Sure. I think a lot of organizations and a lot of systems and networks have this inherent trust out in the world that, we need to be able to, we need to be accessible. We want, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is just making it easy so that I don't have to go do custom rules or manage something. And so there's that. Well, then there's also a level of skill required for, in a lot of cases, for implementing changes that could filter or restrict access. So it's just easy to leave the door open or the doors unlocked or have fewer layers. I see it a lot where organizations call and say, hey, I've got this problem. I think someone's trying to get me from Germany. I said, okay, well, we can look into that. But in the meantime, do you guys care about people from Germany hitting your network? No. Well, just block Germany. Well, that's
Right.
an easy problem. Solved. Well, then, yeah, all right. So there's website traffic, there's network traffic, there's VPN traffic, there's cloud, all of those things. And this goes back to, how do we better protect ourselves, whether it's MFA or not? And it's really about understanding the risk to us as an individual, us as a company, and then what kind of things can we put in place to mitigate those risks, right? So if we're concerned about people stealing our users' credentials, what can we do to reduce the likelihood of that happening? Well, we could really focus in on who should have the ability to log in. So even if Curtis's credentials were compromised, if he's logging in from Germany, it won't work. Right.
Right.
Well, then, all right. So we implement MFA so that, Curtis figures that out. So he compromises a machine in the US to log in from the US, and now the credentials work, but he's being challenged with MFA. Well, he steals Persona's MFA token by phishing it, sending him a phishing email that gets him to go to a website. Because he's already trusted in his browser, the website scrapes that MFA token. Now I have all three things: ID, password, MFA. But I can configure my system to only allow one login, no concurrent logins, definitely no logins across, land speed travel distances. So there's tons of things you can do.
You've talked
to
about
mitigate all of
travel before, right?
Right. It just takes time and effort and skill and an understanding. And all of that is great on the technical side until you implement it. And then you get your users going, well, that's too difficult. And I don't like that. And so now you've got the political fight. And a lot of technical people will give up on the political fight. It's just like,
Well, as you're talking,
it's not worth losing my job over.
as you're talking through that last point, Mike, I was just thinking in my head, I'm like, why do all products and companies just do this by default? And you hit on it at the very end, right? It's like users are going to complain. There's going to be friction in their experience. They're not going to like it. And then you're going to get so many support tickets. You're going to be like, whoa, what do we do? Let's go back to the old way.
Yeah. And so it comes down to a balance of security and usability from a technical and controls perspective. And then a personal administrative, it's, do I want to fight this battle, or do I want to live to, work another day? Because your time's limited in either way, in either case. But would you rather be fired because you tried to do something good, or you got fired because you didn't do something good, and the company was compromised and you were fired for that reason? So it's a struggle.
I think a place to start. I've seen that. And I've seen it in backups, right? I've seen it where you're trying to do the thing, and you get the group that's like, I don't want to do the thing, right? Whether it's, in my case, in backups, I go all the way back to when I was at that oil and gas company, and I was just trying to enable backups for the first time on this really big Oracle database, right? That was really important. It had never been backed up, and it involved me doing a couple of things that the DBA was fighting me on. I can't fathom the idea of having a valid system that isn't backed up and anybody being okay with that. But still, that would happen. The same thing happens in cybersecurity, right? Do you think it would be easier and perhaps more important to start with administrative accounts, right? Privileged accounts, where first off, it's a smaller number, and possibly it's a different group of people that hopefully will have some better understanding of the importance of this. Does that sound like a good idea?
Absolutely. You can log an alert on privileged account use, whether it's an admin or a service account. And all of that stuff should be tracked, both successful and failed login attempts for privileged accounts.
Now, the things that you suggested earlier, those all sounded great, but they sounded complicated, right? It sounds easy to turn off Germany. It turns out easy to turn off Russia. But some of that other stuff, it sounded like it starts to get complicated. So my question is, you're like, it's not complicated for you, Mike, but I'm just saying for maybe the average everyday person, it's
really not.
Are there tools that can help this be easier to do?
There's tons of tools, but then you've got to go learn a tool. A lot of these capabilities are built into stuff you probably already pay for. So your normal Windows machine, Windows 11, as an example, you've got a firewall, you've got Windows Defender, all that stuff comes with your Windows license. Go watch a YouTube video on how to configure it to protect you better. You'll learn everything you need to know in like 15 minutes, and it'll even walk you through it. if you're an administrator in Office 365, as an example, there are hundreds of hours of training videos for free that walk you through all this stuff step by step. And if you don't want to watch a video, it's all lined out in a nice Microsoft document that'll take you through it step 1 through whatever with links. Like you click the link and it takes you right into your admin console, the exact right spot to do it. And there are tools in Office 365 that allow you to test. Like, I want to turn this on. Let me test it to make sure I don't, break the environment. And pick a user. Start with your admin account.
Yeah.
So but here's my biggest thing. Like, given it's 2026 and we're in the age of AI, like, why don't you just go ask like Claude or Gemini or
Absolutely. Yep.
take your pick of AI
Or even more succinctly with Microsoft, you know what? Buy a Copilot license. It's like $100 a year, and tell Copilot, now that you're the admin and you've got a Copilot license, ask Copilot to help you.
Yeah.
It has the same privileges that you do and can see all that stuff.
I had a mission critical system that went down yesterday, right at the very inopportune time. You know what that was?
your TV.
Yeah, my TV stopped working just before we had invited a bunch of people over to watch the World Cup final. And I used AI. I was like, I got 3 different pieces. I got the Apple TV box, I got the sound bar, and it's going through the sound bar up to the TV. And I hadn't used this particular TV in a while. And I just sat there, worked through. I was like, I got this. These are the brands of the things I have. And Claude just worked me through fixing it. And
I've been replaced.
Done in a few minutes. You've been.
Because last time I helped you troubleshoot this, I remember.
Yeah, completely agree. That is definitely a great place to start, because all of those phishing resistant things that you talk about. And by the way, let's just talk about, why is an MFA by itself good enough? Why can't we just turn on MFA? And there are a bunch of reasons, right? You talked about stealing session credentials. That is a possibility, right? Other things are the MFA exhaustion, right? Which is something where you just bombard meaning the bad guy, just bombard the person with so many MFA requests that at some point they just respond just to make it go away, which is a horrible response. But I think we can agree that there's certain groups of people that would respond that way, right? And that's why we have to add this extra logic behind MFA to make it more resistant to phishing. Go ahead.
But there's still that usability and culture part behind it. I mean, you talked about MFA exhaustion. Do you have lock in your house exhaustion? Right? You're going to go back home because you forgot to lock the front door. Right? You care. You have a responsibility. MFA should be the same. And if you're not requiring MFA every time they log in, then you've diminished the value of it. But then also on the back end, on the IT side, the technical side, there are controls for limiting the lifespan of MFA also. So Mike's been logged in for 20 hours on the same MFA token. That shouldn't, they should expire at some point. And you can configure that.
Do you know if because I know a lot of websites, right? It's like you log into your bank and you enter and it's like, oh, remember me for next time so you don't get the MFA again. Do you know, Mike? And that's like the exact opposite of what you want, right, from MFA. And so I guess the question I had is, Mike, in these tools that you were talking about where you can set these policies, do you know if they also have that ability to say, hey, by the way, never allow a user to say, trust this device?
Yeah, so that's a group policy you can push out. So there's a couple things. As an IT administrator, I can restrict what browsers you can use. Like, I don't want you to use Firefox, just as an example. So you can only use Edge and Chrome, right? So you can push policies out like that, and then within that policy and within MFA, you can select never allow or prohibit. You can prohibit users from saving MFA credentials in browsers, and any other credentials. You can prohibit them from saving credentials in the browser in general. Yep.
My websites only work with Internet Explorer.
Netscape.
Yes. Wow, you took us back there. All right, MFA is really important, and as long as we're talking about it, we'll just throw in Passkeys are actually better than MFA. But today we're talking about at least have MFA, for goodness sakes, and also look into being more resistant to phishing, these extra features that Mike talked about, to look for things like impossible travel. How is he in both in San Diego and London all at the same time, right? That's what they call impossible travel. And why is he, if you can add some logic of like, why is he never logs in at 3 a.m? Why is he logging in at 3 a.m? Perhaps just add an extra level of security when weird things happen, right? All right. Well, thanks, Prasanna and Mike, once again.
It's always
Sure.
fun.
Never enough time to say all I want to say, but I'm glad I could contribute.
Yeah. All right. And thanks to everyone out there listening. You're why we do this. That is a wrap. The Backup Wrap-Up is written, recorded, and produced by me, W. Curtis Preston. If you need backup or DR consulting, content generation, or expert witness work, check out backupcentral.com. You can also find links for my O'Reilly books on the same website. Remember, this is an independent podcast, and any opinions that you hear are those of the speaker and not necessarily an employer. Thanks for listening.